pandemic and an economic.
It's your boy Young Love, I give him that time. Pancho leg stand and punchy America. Banyi doll, banaban. Pancho leg stand and punchy America. Banyi doll, banaban. Walk on your leg, kankaro what on a watching. Oga leg, gear, wow, where I leg. Panda with ya, punchy America. Banyi doll, bano. Chingatongo pandon, could you ever buy a check? Papu panda jiro, what ya be doll venting. Stand and punchy America, Banyi doll, Banaban, Pancho leg stand and punchy America, Banyi doll, Banaban, walk on your leg, Kankaro what on a watching, Oga leg, gear, wow, where I leg, Panda with ya, punchy America, Banyi doll, Bano, Chingatongo, Pandon, Kujero by a check.
Welcome to Leg State Media. Tonight in Australia local time is 2:43 a.m. We have received a breaking news that Donald J. Trump lost the election of United States of America. Former Vice President Joe Biden is the president-elect. And Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, they won the election. Please, let's watch the news from the ABC News.
Tenor is a big deal. I also think that there are a lot of people who are excited about the future. And so Kamala Harris represents that. I think she's someone that we feel like we can work with and talk to. I think she can be a unifier. I think she's strong. I think she's powerful. And I think we need that. And so at the end of the day, I think the combination of the ticket is exactly what we need right now. It's the best we could have expected, I think, today. And we're hopeful. But at the end of the day, I do want to respond to what Governor Christie said. When you look at this map, Democrats showed up, Black and brown people showed up, progressives showed up. And what I hope that the Biden-Harris presidency does is not ignore those people. Because once you lose those people, you can't get them back. They showed up through a pandemic, and they want real change, and they want it now. Don't miss those cries. The Republicans don't get to decide who Democrats are or who this president is. They showed up for their person. And Republicans, time and time again, they get into leadership, and then they only serve their people first. They don't come to Democrats and say, let's be bipartisan. They serve their folks first. But as soon as Democrats get in leadership, Republicans are like, we need to work together. You need to not talk to the people or work for the people who got you to the party. And my hope is we will have a lot of conversations going forward about how we actually serve Americans in this country.
The reality is that Donald Trump's voters came out as well. Republican voters came out as well. Donald Trump will win the second highest vote total of any American candidate, presidential candidate in American history. Sarah Fagan. Republicans, right now, we're not sure whether they're going to maintain control of the Senate. We have those 2 seats out in Georgia, but they had a decent night. They picked up seats in the House as well. This is going to create a challenge for Vice President Biden, but also a challenge for the Republican Party.
Well, sure it is. You know, the question is, where does the party go from here? And, you know, we're still the minority party with the president, or will be the minority party with the president in office. And, you know, I look at this election, and what is so striking to me is we saw something Tuesday that almost never happens in American politics. And if there's any question about this country being a center-right country, in my mind, it still is. Republicans had a good night. They actually had a great night. They picked up a governor. They picked up the House seats you mentioned. Likely will retain control of the Senate. We do have runoffs. This was a repudiation of Donald Trump as a person, not his policies. His policies on the ballot did very well. He underperformed these congressional candidates in many congressional districts. That rarely happens in American politics. And so when you step back and look at this, Donald Trump only has himself to blame.
Sarah Fagan, thanks very much. Turner, and I imagine there are going to be endless debates whether it's a center-right or a center-left country. One thing we can say for sure, it is a divided country. As you look at state after state after state, 50 to 49, 49 to 49, 49 to 48.
It is a divided country. One wonders if there is some kind of consensus in the middle, and Joe Biden's going to go look for it because while Donald Trump won the presidency in 2016 by saying, "Make America great again," harking back to an American yesteryear, in this race, in many ways, it was really Joe Biden who was the throwback candidate, right? He's an old-fashioned, handshaking, backslapping Paul who looks at those divides and says, "I've made deals all my life. I made deals with Bob Dole. I made deals with Strom Thurmond. Maybe I can do something here." And he doesn't tweet. Donald Trump, for all of his "Make America Great Again," is a 21st century figure. He is a master of social media. He was one of the most powerful figures on the newest media in the world.
But let me just stop you. You say master of social media, and that is certainly true. He saw that as his major communication device. It may have been his undoing.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. The country looked at the guy who was the reality TV star, the social media guy, wanted to reinvent the staid grand old party into a 21st century nationalist populist movement, and they wanted to go with something a little safer, a little quieter, maybe even a throwback to a different kind of ideal of manhood, the strong, silent, decent type, rather than the braggart.
Cecilia Vega, we have a statement from the Trump White House.
Yeah, we do, George. I'm just, bear with me here because we just got it and I'm reading through it. It's full of some falsehoods, as you might imagine. But what they say at the gist is, we know, quote, "We know why Joe Biden is rushing to falsely pose as the winner and why his media allies are trying so hard to help him. They don't want the truth to be exposed. The simple fact is the election is far from over." They say Joe Biden has not been certified as the winner of any states, let alone in any highly contested states. And they go on to lay out their claim, particularly in Pennsylvania. They say that their legal observers were not permitted meaningful access to watch the counting process. And just a very quick fact check there were Trump team observers allowing canvassing process within 6 feet. They wanted to be closer. They said they couldn't see some of the ballots being counted.
Cheering in the streets and people circulating around, honking their horns in celebration. The protests that we've seen here in Philadelphia have been primarily in favor of Joe Biden, but we have seen Trump supporters here as well, and we know we could see more of them here as well, particularly around here, around the convention center, arrested for allegedly plotting an attack on poll workers here. So again, getting back to this lead, this goes to a recent dump of votes. The process has been proceeding here with the vote count, and there are still more to go. We estimate as many as 100,000 more votes left to be tallied. But given that the votes are primarily coming from here in Pennsylvania County and also Allegheny County, which includes Pittsburgh, two areas of the state that have leaned heavily Democratic, and the votes there have been coming in heavily Democratic. This is why news organizations like ours and the Associated Press are willing to call this for Joe Biden. But we are also waiting now for a press conference with the president's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, and one of his campaign managers, Corey Lewandowski. They were scheduled to speak just a short time ago in another section of Philadelphia to address the ongoing count here. As I said, this has really been the focus of the Trump campaign and trying to find a way to get to the votes that he needs in order to overtake Joe Biden. And this was the one state that he needed in order to do that. The 20 electoral votes were the only way that he could get over the top. And so they have been contesting every last vote. So far, the court decisions have not helped them or ruled in their favor. So it'll be interesting to see what the reaction is from the Trump campaign when we get that. It could be in a matter of minutes, although we don't know how this announcement and calling the race will affect them. They may be regrouping right now to decide how they approach that and deal with that with the media.
Indeed, and we have yet to hear from the Trump campaign. The last tweet from Donald Trump was, "I won this election by a lot." Obviously, that doesn't seem to be the case. Kristen Salumi, they're watching everything for us in Pennsylvania. Thanks so much, Kristen. Well, right now we can also speak to Neil McKeegan. He is a lecturer at the University of Pennsylvania Carey Law School. Neil, thanks so much for being with us. I want to start by asking you for your reaction to all of this. After all these days of uncertainty, it does seem that we now finally have an outcome. How are you feeling?
Sure. Well, I think Americans have long awaited for this moment. It's certainly been an election and a campaign unlike any other in history. And I think we can be very confident in this projection and in these results in that Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. And of course, I'm feeling thrilled that Senator Harris will be the first South Asian and Black woman elected to the vice presidency in history. So it's really a special time. If you are here in Philadelphia, you hear the cars honking and the people cheering. And it reminds me of 2008 when Barack Obama was first elected.
Neil, do stay with me. I do want to ask you about some of the legal challenges that we are seeing in Pennsylvania. But for now, I just want to cross back very briefly to our correspondent, Alan Fisher in Washington, D.C. Because, Alan, I believe you've just heard from the Trump campaign about all of this. What are you hearing from them?
Well, the fact that we got reactions so quickly suggests that this has been in the making for some time and ready to go. Let me just read you what this statement from the Trump campaign says. We all know why Joe Biden is rushing to falsely pose as the winner and why his media allies are trying so hard to help him. They don't want the truth to be exposed. The simple fact is this election is far from over. Joe Biden has not been certified as the winner of any states, let alone any of the highly contested states headed for mandatory recounts, or states where our campaign has valid and legitimate legal challenges that could determine the ultimate victor. In Pennsylvania, for example, our legal observers were not permitted meaningful access to watch the counting process. Legal votes decide who is president, not the news media. Beginning Monday, our campaign will start prosecuting our case in court to ensure election laws are fully upheld and the rightful winner is seated. The American people are entitled to an honest election. That means counting all legal ballots and not counting any illegal ballots. This is the only way to ensure the public has full confidence in our election. It remains shocking that the Biden campaign refuses to agree with this basic principle and wants ballots counted even if they are fraudulent, manufactured, or cast by ineligible or deceased voters. Let me just say, and fact check the statement as we go along, they have presented no evidence of that, and that is not what Joe Biden has been saying. Only a party engaged in wrongdoing would unlawfully keep observers out of the count room and their fight in court to block their access. So what is Biden hiding? I will not rest until the American people have the honest vote count they deserve and that democracy demands. That statement just in from Donald J. Trump. He's currently playing golf at his course in Virginia. This is a statement that was obviously ready to go. There's a couple of factual errors in there, but I know you're dealing with a guest, so let me hand back to the studio and we will go and do our fact checking in the meantime.
We will stay across that for you here. Absolutely. Alan Fisher there with all the very latest from Washington, D.C. Thanks so much, Alan. Well, let's now go straight back to Jamal El-Shayal. He's in Joe Biden's home state of Delaware. Joe Biden, I believe, has started to speak out. Jamal, what are we hearing from the Biden camp now?
So he's just tweeted, Nastasia, America, I'm honored that you have chosen me to lead our great country. The work ahead of us will be hard, but I promise you this, I'll be a president for all Americans. Whether you voted for me or not, I will keep the faith that you have placed in me. And that's been accompanied with a video of some sort, assuming that it's showing kind of the program that he wishes to follow as a president. So that is the first time that Joe Biden has essentially claimed victory since Tuesday's voting. It is something that obviously is going down very well here with the handful of supporters that have gathered to celebrate this moment. Maybe we can speak to some of them here. Hello. Tell us a bit about your feelings right now.
I am so excited. I can hardly contain myself. We've been waiting for this a long, long time.
What makes this such an important day for you?
Trump is out of there. We've got a female vice president and gives people like her hope in the future. I finally feel like we have hope.
Thank you very much. So, you know, that speaks to the point we were talking about earlier about the significance of Kamala Harris. It's not just an issue of Joe Biden winning, but obviously as popular as Joe Biden has proven to be with getting all those votes, it's also as unpopular as Trump is with a huge part of the population. Because whenever we do speak to people, one of the things they're saying is that it is a relief that Trump is out. The past 4 years have been, let's say, tumultuous to say the least. Unpopular with a large section of society, obviously popular with a large section of society as well, in the fact that millions also voted for Trump. Anastasia, after Biden has now announced and acknowledged that he has won these elections, we are expecting more and more people to converge. This is maybe the busiest it's been since we've been essentially camped out here since Tuesday. Expect more and more people to come. Like I say, where you look over here, the huge American flag that's blowing in the wind there. There's a massive car park underneath it. The stage is set. There's balloons everywhere. Listen into this. This, I can tell you, is just maybe a small snippet of the atmosphere that we'll be seeing once everybody does converge here. Biden is extremely popular in his hometown. We heard from people who say he was very approachable when he was a senator, when he was a vice president, and that admiration is shared with a lot of the supporters who will be sure to come out here and celebrate what they view as a very historic day in the political life of the United States of America.
Well, Jamal Al-Shayal there in Joe Biden's home state of Delaware on the ground for us amidst all those celebrations. Thanks so much, Jamal. Well, we're also now watching live celebrations in Washington, D.C., just outside the White House. If you are just joining us here on Al Jazeera, Democratic candidate Joe Biden is now the projected winner of the state of Pennsylvania. The state's 20 electoral college votes will push him over the 270 mark needed to win the race to the White House. Now, provisional and mail-in ballots are still being tallied in key battleground states of Pennsylvania, Georgia, Nevada, and North Carolina. Well, let's now go back to Neil Makija. He's a lecturer at the University of Pennsylvania Carey Law School. Neil, we just heard there from our correspondent in Washington, D.C., Alan, that we are expecting a legal challenge, or further legal challenges from the Trump campaign, and they're going to start prosecuting their case on Monday. What do you make of that? Could anything at this stage, in terms of legal challenges, change the result?
No, and you can't really say it emphatically enough that everything that came out of the president's lawyer's mouth was complete garbage. And that's been true for the last 4 years through his impeachment, through all of his advisors getting indicted and charged with federal crimes. This is the end of the Trump era, and it has happened today, and it happened in Pennsylvania because the voters voted him out. And it's completely clear in that, the AP and the CNN and all the networks that have called this, they waited a week. They waited a week to see the full count, and now it's clear that the number of outstanding ballots is minimal compared to the margin by which Joe Biden is winning. So I think it's time to turn off Twitter in terms of Donald Trump, and to really start focusing on where the country needs to go and what we can do to address the pandemic and the devastation that has wreaked on the economy.
Neil Makija, the lecturer at the University of Pennsylvania Carey Law School. We'll be coming back to you a little bit later. Thanks for that, Neil. But right now, I'd like to update all of our viewers who are joining us here on Al Jazeera, live from Doha. It has just gone 1700 GMT. That is midday on the US East Coast. And in breaking news, we are projecting that Joe Biden is now US president-elect. 4 days after America went to the polls, the votes are still being counted amid protests and several legal challenges by the Trump campaign. But we do believe that Joe Biden is the projected winner of Pennsylvania, and that means that 20 electoral college votes will push him over the magic number of 270. You can see those celebrations there now outside the White House in Washington, D.C. Let's speak to our correspondent, Alan Fisher. He is also in Washington, D.C., watching all of that happen. Alan, huge news here, which it seems is not being accepted by the Trump campaign.
That's right. We just had a statement from Donald Trump in the last couple of minutes. Remember, he's currently playing golf on his golf course in Virginia. Spent a lot of time in the golf course during his time in office, even though before he was elected, he said he would never have time to visit his properties because he'd be too busy working for the American people, and there had been some pressure on him to be seen doing something presidential to send a message to the country that even though there were recounts in a number of states, counts going on in a number of states, that it was still business as usual. But he decided to take advantage of this glorious Saturday in November and head off to the golf course. Certainly he says that from Monday his campaign will start to prosecute their legal case in a number of courts. But speaking to all experts, it seems that this really is a long shot, that the cases that they have put forward so far have been dismissed by the court. They have talked about voter fraud and haven't produced any evidence. They've talked about ballot stuffing and haven't produced any evidence. They've talked about dead people voting in Pennsylvania and haven't produced any evidence. So the pressure really is on them now to start producing the evidence to back up their legal case. We always knew Donald Trump was going to take this to court. Remember, how many times was he asked before the election, will you concede to a peaceful transfer of power? And he said he couldn't guarantee that because he wanted to see how the election panned out, which everyone then said was a case of him setting this up for a legal challenge. So we're now in the position where 4 years ago, Donald Trump unexpectedly won the presidency and became the 45th president of the United States. And here on a Saturday in November, Joe Biden has been elected as the president-elect to become the 46th president of the United States. This election, it seems, is over, bar the fighting. There's still a long way to go.
And we'll be watching that very closely for you here on Al Jazeera. Alan Fisher there in Washington, D.C. for us, amongst all those celebrations as we get this historic news. Thank you so much, Alan. Well, let's now go straight to Biden's home state of Delaware, where Jamal El-Shayal joins us from Wilmington. Jamal, we're hearing from the Biden campaign that he's already saying he's honored but calling for unity.
Indeed, he tweeted in the past few minutes there that he is honored that Americans chose him to lead what he described as our great country. The work ahead obviously will be hard, but he says, I promise you this, I'll be a president for all Americans. And there you are, central to the message that's been coming in throughout from the Biden camp is a call for unity and a commitment that he, although ran as a Democrat, would rule and govern as a president for everyone. And he says whether they voted for him or not, he will keep the faith that the people have placed in him. So this, every time he came to speak, Nastasia, over the past couple of days, his supporters at least were really hopeful that he was finally going to announce that he was the victor of this tightly contested presidency. He finally has done that, albeit in the face of the denials that have come from Donald Trump. That hasn't stopped more and more people to come here, converge on the Chase Center where the campaign's headquarters is, where it seems some sort of celebrations will be taking place at some point, probably today, where a stage has been set up for him to address not just obviously his supporters, but his the entire country. There is security cordons all around the area. Whenever a car passes by, they're all honking. The celebrations are starting, but they're expecting them to be a lot bigger later on today.
Jamal El-Shayal there, following everything happening in Delaware for us, where Joe Biden that's his home state. We're getting all the reaction from there. Thank you so much, Jamal. Well, right now, let's move on to speak to Michael Isikoff. He's the chief investigative correspondent at Yahoo News, and he joins us now from Bald Hill Island in North Carolina. Michael, thank you for being with us.
Yeah, that's all the news that we were waiting to hear, that the U.S. election has come to an end, and we are worried of what will be the outcome, whether Donald J. Trump will accept the defeat. Is something that ringing in the mind of everyone. So we have to listen to what's going on.
The former Confederates, and he said he essentially extended a hand and tried to bring them back into the fold. That's exactly what Joe Biden has to do at this moment in time. When John F. Kennedy became president 60 years ago in 1960 with a razor-thin margin of 0.2%. He said the margin is thin, but the responsibility is clear. And Joe Biden's responsibility at this moment is to make good on his promise to bring America back together and to resolve this confluence of crises that he faces, an economic free fall, a pandemic, and of course, the disunity that we find in the country today.
Mark Updegrove, thanks. Byron Pitts, one of the big questions is going to be, is America ready to unify?
George, I would say our history would suggest yes. As the people have been saying recently, we've seen these pivot points in our nation's history where we've been especially divided, but people come together. You know, George, in this moment, I'm thinking about Lyndon Johnson, who, when a moment in our nation's history when we were broken, when we were fearful, he stepped in. There are many people who will tell you some of the significant gains in civil rights occurred on his watch because he was a man uniquely qualified. Unlike President Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson was someone who grew up in the South, who sort of understood race relations in a way that only a white man from the South could understand. And so he could speak the language with some in the Democratic Party who were reluctant to move forward. So he was able to move the nation forward. And also, George, as I think about this moment for Joe Biden, I think of the late Billy Graham, who once said there are only two kinds of preachers in this world: the preachers who build you up and the preachers who tear you down. For many people, Donald Trump was the kind of preacher who tears you down, right? Part of his charm to the people who admired him was he called it as he saw it. And so that often meant demonizing other people. Well, Joe Biden is the other kind of preacher. He spent his political career building people up. And so I think, George, our history will suggest we have always been a nation divided. And I think President Trump took advantage of that, and one can make the argument leaned into that divide. Joe Biden, a different kind of personality, a different kind of leader, he will seek to bridge that divide, a divide that was in existence long before Donald Trump came on the stage, and it will likely, George, live long past us. And George, a final point, if I may, in talking about Kamala Harris, this is a woman of color who graduated from a historically black college, Howard University. Historically in our nation's history, the vast majority of prominent black figures in our nation's history are people who graduate from historically black colleges. I would know in HBCU campuses across this country, there is a unique sense of pride. I know I've had family members and friends who've gone to HBCUs, and there is something in the fiber of that kind of education that talks about excellence and what excellence has to look like in a majority society. So I would think there are many avenues, parts of our country. Some people are upset, but many lanes in our nation that are celebrating this moment of change, and I think for many people, this moment of calm.
We are seeing people start to gather in Times Square as well. Heidi Heitkamp, that's a long way from North Dakota, the state that you represented in the United States Senate, a state that had become deep Trump country. How does Joe Biden speak to MAGA America?
You know, I think we all need to step back right now, George, and understand what's going on the other side. And on the other side today, there's going to be a rally at the state capitol in support of the president. Our entire congressional delegation is going to be there to speak. This is a long way from being over, and it's a long way from the country being able to heal. And you know, I know this is a moment. I think, that, as I said last night, it was that Biden winning is the worst kept secret in America. We've been there for a long time. The danger that we have right now is what's going to happen with the more militant portion of the MAGA movement, and how is Biden going to speak to the non-militant side of this, and how do we curtail and control this? You give this 2 days to fester, they already don't believe what the media says because they've been told for 4 years this is fake news. Today, we've underreported the fact that they lost a case in Michigan. The judge saying there's no there. We need to be talking about all the failure of raising these issues in this election and how those efforts are failing, because when we get that news out there, people start seeing the narrative that this isn't going to change. And so there's people out there who believe that you guys are wrong. He won the election. There's going to be an opportunity. And so I say that Biden needs to divide and conquer. He needs to speak to the portion of those folks and encourage calm. But I'm very, very concerned about what's going to happen in the next 24 to 48 hours.
Thanks for that note of caution. David Muir, perhaps one of the tools that he can draw on, one of the things that Joe Biden can draw on as he tries to speak to part of the MAGA movement are his working class roots.
No question about that, George. And now the hard work begins, as Heidi mentions right there. And once we see these crowds gathering both in New York City and Washington, D.C., we've heard of the loud crowds from Steve Osunsami in Atlanta, the cheering in the streets. But this is really where that work begins. And we heard last night in our coverage from Governor Christie, this transition has already begun behind the scenes. It's something that the public doesn't see, but regardless of the outcome, based on statute, both teams, a team from the Trump White House and a team from the Biden campaign, begin talking immediately after the election, no matter who the winner is at that point, to make sure that there is a peaceful transition, one of the hallmarks of our democracy, and something that people have been so worried about as we went into day 4 and day 5. Now, of course, with the president-elect that will be Joe Biden. You know, I remember something Joe Biden said to me, George, in the weeks leading up to this election in that interview with Senator Kamala Harris after the convention. He said, "I'll be a president who tells the truth, takes responsibility." But this was important. He said, "I'll invite the opposition right away into the Oval Office to start getting work done. The words of a president matters. It matters who the president is. I'll be willing to engage on day 1 with Republicans to prove to this country that we can unite the country." And one note on Senator Kamala Harris, who, of course, is a big part of this day. She was out last night with the vice president on that stage. And I said at the time when we were talking about it that I thought it spoke volumes that the Biden campaign chose to wait for her. She stood there. She was planning to speak too, had the networks declared yesterday, and did not. They want to make sure that when she has the moment to speak on that stage, that she is able to be part of that moment, that she's making history and that it's not lost on the country. And I gather that will happen, of course, now later today. And one thing Senator Harris said to me, you know, I'd asked her about that question that was so often asked of her during the campaign. People would say to her, you know, will you be Joe Biden's vice presidential pick if that's what happens? And she would say, you know what?
We could see executive orders. We could see firing of the federal officials like Tony Fauci, perhaps the FBI director, perhaps the defense secretary, and we could see pardons for those who were convicted in the Russia investigation and other matters. So we're nowhere free of the disruptions of a Donald Trump presidency, and we won't be until January 20th.
Well, I am curious how you think other countries and foreign leaders are watching all of this play out. You've done a lot of work on the U.S. relationship with Russia, for instance, Michael, and I wonder what Vladimir Putin is thinking watching all of this happen, as well as not just Joe Biden's win, but what happens now in terms of a transition of power.
Right. Well, look, other countries, know where what the results are. They know they're going to be dealing with a Biden presidency, and it's worth remembering that a lot of the people around Joe Biden are known quantities to foreign governments, to foreign leaders. They've served in high-level positions before. Tony Blinken was the Deputy Secretary of State under Barack Obama. He's very close to Joe Biden. Jake Sullivan, another top advisor to Joe Biden, was a top aide to Hillary Clinton. So many of these people will, point to a centrist foreign policy, one in which a Biden presidency will be reaching out to foreign leaders and trying to reach accommodations to set things off on new footings. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't hear about some sort of Russia reset down the road with Putin, as Barack Obama tried when he first came into office. I think you could also try to see some accommodations with the Iranians to try to restore the Iranian nuclear deal that
President Trump ditched. Also, the Paris Climate Accord, that's one you can totally expect a Biden presidency will re-up for, will get us back, get the United States back into the Paris Climate Accord. So you're going to see some changes very quickly in a Biden foreign policy, but I would not expect a radical change because, as I pointed out, many of the players around Joe Biden have been known before. They've served in high-ranking positions before and can generally be described as centrist foreign policy mainstream figures.
Michael Isikoff there, Chief Investigative Correspondent from Yahoo News, speaking to us from North Carolina. Thank you so much for being with us, Michael. Great to get your insights. Well, if you are just joining us here on Al Jazeera, the time is just after 1700 GMT, and we're bringing you the momentous breaking news this hour. And we are projecting that with 284 electoral votes, Joe Biden has won the U.S. presidential election. He is now the president-elect of the United States. Well, let's bring in the host of Al Jazeera's The Bottom Line, Steve Clemens from Washington, D.C. Great to be speaking to you, Steve, at this very historic hour. Let me start by asking you, no concession from Donald Trump, no surprises.
That is kind of predictable. Depending on which side of the aisle you're on, that's just what we all expected, is the president is not going to give up his perch easily. He tweeted an hour ago that he won big. And is just simply discounting this very historic moment where people are out honking horns and, hitting pans and making all sorts of noise. But it's an inflection point in American political history, and I don't see a pathway for Donald Trump to remain in the White House. And we're going to see a change. I agree with Mike Isikoff that Donald Trump has a lot of room to run in these days still left in his presidency, but it will be a concluded presidency, at least for these 4 years.
Well, these legal challenges that he's already mounted, and then this prosecution that he says is going to begin on Monday, what do you make of that? Could that potentially lead anywhere, or is the result the result?
I suppose professionally, I should say there's always an outside chance of some unexpected moment. But I've looked at the legal, the comments about the legal strategies they have thus far, and no one of seriously informed political standing gives those legal challenges a chance to affect anything but at the slightest fringe, which means that what we've seen throughout the United States in the multiple states that have been part of what appears to be Joe Biden's win. And remember, he's going to get at least, it looks like right now, 306 electoral college votes, which is what Donald Trump got, calling it a landslide. So he will be well past, I'm guessing, the 270 electoral college vote threshold. So they would have to undo and disavow votes across the board in multiple states, where states are sovereign with regards to their electoral rules and processes and frames. This is not a national system of voting. It is a federal system of voting. So in that case, I honestly, and just to be, gut candid with you, don't see any chance for the president to overturn what we've seen happen today.
Steve, with 306 electoral college votes, as you said, Trump called that a landslide. Still, though, if we look at the popular vote, and then it was a huge margin here for Joe Biden as well, huge margin. Still, there were nearly 70 million Americans who voted for Trump. How does America move forward in terms of the level of polarization in the country? I mean, we're seeing both Biden supporters and Trump supporters come out in very different atmospheres at the moment.
Let me tell you a story about Joe Biden, whom I happen to have followed for many years, traveled with, and know. There was a time when Harry Reid was the minority leader in the Senate, working with Mitch McConnell, and Joe Biden was vice president in President Obama's administration. And so when they had a tough deal, something going on, Joe Biden would go over and try and help things out, make things work. And Harry Reid asked the president to stop letting Joe Biden come over to the Senate. This is the leading Democrat saying, don't let Joe Biden come over anymore. He keeps wanting to do deals with Republicans. It is in his nature to reach across the aisle, to listen to those people who did vote for Donald Trump, to go meet with their leaders and to find some space where they can do something jointly and together and to neutralize and detoxify this environment. It's what Joe Biden is known for. That's what he did in the United States Senate. And I suspect that what Harry Reid was upset about at that time is the strategy that Joe Biden is going to take when he proceeds forward to try to deal with those 70 million of Americans who were not in his camp.
Indeed, and I know he has a very good relationship with Mitch McConnell, who was the former leader of the Senate for the Republican Party.
That's right.
And if I recall, Mitch McConnell actually went to Beau Biden's funeral and was one of the only people from the other side of the aisle to do that. So clearly, both sides potentially wanting to reach out moving forward here. I do want to interrupt now just to say that we are getting results coming in from Nevada, and Joe Biden is now the projected winner of Nevada as well, with about 1.9 points and 94% of the votes counted there. So vote counting still ongoing. But I mean, it does look like Joe Biden's lead is growing in a number of different places. Let's talk about Joe Biden, the man, Steve. I mean, this is now the third time that he's run for the presidency, and this has been a lifelong dream for him.
Oh, it has been. I mean, I think the first time he ran, I may be wrong on this, may have been 1984. So go back and check that. But he was a very young guy back then. I think he was the youngest guy to run for president at that time, within one of the major parties. And now he's one of the oldest, if not the oldest. So he's been at this a number of times. Look, anyone who wants to make a credible run for the president of the United States, that there's something inside them that can't stop running, that doesn't want to do it, that looks at it as practically unpatriotic not to put themselves forward. I think to be fair to Donald Trump, I think he probably has that same gene, that he can't imagine himself not having taken these steps to do this. So yes, Joe Biden has been at this for a long time, but he's had an extraordinary life of public service, which is one of the criticisms lodged against him, was that he was a career politician. He'd been around for so long, both in the House, in the Senate, in the vice president's role. And so he has tons of experience, but they were turning that around saying he's a careerist at this. But there is something that is of little doubt, and that is he's seen an extraordinary number of tough circumstances in foreign policy, in domestic policy, in different levels of divide in the United States over all sorts of issues, many contentious issues involving just about every major player politically in the United States, but also globally. And that is the Rolodex. We used to call them Rolodexes, but now they're their contact files on your smartphones. But he brings an enormous Rolodex, an enormous contact list with him of experiences and people.
Well, Joe Biden is also now going to be the oldest president ever of the United States. And we've been saying how important it is for him to choose a running mate that would be able to get him to this point. And Kamala Harris is clearly that person. Incredible symbolism in her election as vice president today. What do you make of her and her political movements going forward from here?
It's hard to understate the historic importance of the first female, the first woman having now being in this role of vice president of the United States. This has not happened before. Others have tried and run, but nobody has won. She will be there. It finally breaks through a key ceiling, not yet the presidential ceiling, but it puts her in a prime place to do that. I think Republicans also have extraordinary leading women. Nikki Haley comes to mind, who might run in 2024, perhaps. Some people speculate. So when you begin looking at that, this has changed the dynamics in a huge way for the role of women, the just and fair place of women at the American political table in a way that just talking about could never do. So this is an extraordinary moment. Plus, she happens to be both of Black and South Asian descent. She is a person of rich cultural and ethnic background, and that has been another part of the identity shift in America, one of inclusion and embrace of everyone here, as opposed to the triumphalism of one corner of that racial segment in the United States.
Steve, I want to just take a step back here and look at the country as a whole, how it's changed over the last 4 years and how both the Democratic and Republican parties have changed. I mean, we're looking at an incredibly diverse country. We've seen voting trends change so much, even though it kind of defied the polls as we were expecting this year.
Right.
What do you make of the shifting demographics in the states and how that's affected this election?
It's a fascinating question. You know, you've seen America become less white, but it's not that way all throughout the country. You've seen Americans who are older were traditional conservatives, and they always, I tell you, the most powerful, most reliable voter in America is the woman who is over 65 years old. She says she's going to vote, and she goes and votes. And I sort of feel like, the issues about healthcare, the issues about the financial security of older Americans are going to be back on the table because they were out. Now, they were out in both parties, and I've got to look at the crosstabs and breakdowns, another point. But they're always really the mainstay. We talk a lot about the next generations coming on, the Gen Zers, the millennials, and that's important, but they do not vote in the bulk and weight of older Americans. So that's one key part of the demographic divide and realities that are out there. But I think racially, you've seen America become more of a diverse country. And you've also seen, I think this is what Georgia puts out there as a very interesting example. A lot of people sat out previous races because they didn't think their vote would matter, because they thought the system was stacked against them, that they thought despite being, black, being in a community where they were there, that they just never got a fair shake. The Georgia win for Joe Biden, what Stacey Abrams and others were able to engineer in this vote, has now given people a taste that their vote can matter, create inflection points, and shift. And I suspect that not only will we continue to look at demographic and shifts around the country, but we're going to see greater engagement in future elections now across these different identity groups in ways we've never seen before because they saw change happen.
Steve, stay with me. I just want to have a look at some of these pictures and show our viewers some of the celebrations that we are seeing around the country. In a number of places, we're seeing, actually divergent groups. We can see on one side of your screen there, a huge amount of Trump supporters out with Trump flags and US flags, waving them out on the streets. That's in Washington, D.C. But on the other hand, we're seeing Biden supporters out on the streets in New York cheering. We've had pots banging, as you were saying. We're seeing celebrations all across the country. And it makes me wonder, Steve, you were talking about turnout there. And given the huge amount of turnout that we saw this election, even in the midst of a huge coronavirus pandemic, and all the potential issues around legitimacy and questions being raised about the democratic process, all of that, do you feel that in some way this is a vindication of the democratic process, a renewal of the democratic process in some form?
Absolutely, I do. And I'll tell you why, because both sides came out, and big respect to both parties that were able to do this. I think the polls were predicting a bit of a blue wave that turned out to be absolutely poppycock. And that when you looked at it, there were people who really do subscribe to a lot of what Donald Trump stood for. What did he stand for? Washington was over-regulating a lot of their lives, that they worried about law and security. He continued to poll well about economic matters, better than Joe Biden did. And to a certain degree, a number of them were fearful, given a lot of the protests and tension that were going around the country. That's okay. That is legitimate. What is not legitimate in the American political race, and we saw social media companies behave more responsibly. We didn't see any case that I've seen thus far of significant Russian or Chinese or Iranian meddling within the election systems themselves. At this time last year, the Department of Homeland Security, 4 years ago, the Department of Homeland Security knew that at least 29 state electoral systems had been penetrated, had been played with in some way or another. That didn't necessarily affect the outcome of the race, but we had intrusions by foreign actors in our system. Those are the kinds of things that began to stress the questions of legitimacy of the outcome that we had. None of that seems to have been a factor in this case. We didn't have James Comey, the former director of the FBI, days before the election come out and successfully tilt this election. So you saw a true struggle and contrast of views. And while Donald Trump doesn't like this outcome yet, and they're going to legally contest it, the truth is that Republicans I respect at the highest levels of the United States Senate, even Republicans within the White House, whom I have spoken to, understand that this was a fair and free election. And counting all of those legitimate votes has come. I tell everybody, Donald Trump keeps talking about it as if it was an act in motion. It's really like taking, all the numbers of jelly beans in a jelly bean jar that have already been cast. That number is static. You just need to guess or count the number of those jelly beans. That's what vote counting is. It's a static process that we're watching and visualizing, but no more votes added, no more votes deleted. And I think that process is one, when you look at the struggle, you look at the engagement, you look at the robustness, the greatest number of votes in this country per capita in a century. So this is a revitalization of democracy, not a suspension of it.
Well, Steve, I then have to ask you, what do you think is going through Donald Trump's head right now? We're talking about legitimacy. What do you think his closest aides, some of whom are members of his family, what are they saying to him right now as he is out on the golf course?
Donald Trump is a driven, results-oriented obsessive, and that is why he has been so successful in many parts of his life, even when he has had speed bumps, when he's had bankruptcies, when he had things go against him. Donald Trump has overcome those by force of will and changing the environment of those around him, bankers that let him have extraordinary deals even as he was not financially performing and allowing things to go on. It's just the secret of his success, and I think we should acknowledge that. But I think the best way to look for what those people around him are saying is you go to Laura Ingraham, one of the top Fox News commentators, anchors, who regularly speaks to and supports overtly President Trump. She's saying out loud, leave with dignity. Take this moment, reflect on democracy, reflect on your gains, leave with dignity. It's in your interest to mark your place in history at this moment. Don't drag it out in terms of a bitter and losing battle where the air will go out of his tires around him as more and more people distance themselves from his failing bandwagon, if you will. And I think they'll have to go through the emotion of these next couple of days. We'll have to see how he responds. He's an impossible guy to predict, but I think the terrain that he controls is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. You can already see it in the tweets from leading senators who never ever allowed any distance between themselves and President Trump before, but now they are clearly doing that, and that's not something he's going to be able to reverse.
Steve Clemons there, the host of Al Jazeera's show, The Bottom Line, speaking to us there from Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us right at this very historic moment. Well, the time is just after 17:30 GMT, and we're bringing you momentous breaking news this hour. We are projecting that with 290 electoral votes, Joe Biden has now won the U.S. presidential election. That makes him the president-elect of the United States. Pennsylvania is the state that put him over the top, and he has now also been projected to have won Nevada. Well, let's show you some of these incredible pictures of people celebrating around the country. You can see crowds are out. Well, actually, these aren't the celebrations. There are celebrations in other places. These are Trump supporters out in Washington, D.C., who are none too pleased about the result that's been called. Even on Fox News, it appears that they are referring to President-elect Biden. Let's have a listen to this crowd. Well, we have heard from the Trump campaign, and President Donald Trump is refusing to concede. It does appear that he's out golfing at the moment, and so we have yet to hear from him himself. We have heard from his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, who has confirmed that he is not conceding, and a statement from the Trump campaign suggests that they will proceed with further litigation on Monday. That is yet unspecified as to what they're pursuing, but they do say that will begin on Monday. Let's now take this moment to speak to Neil Makija. He's a lecturer at the University of Pennsylvania Carey Law School. Neil, what do you make of all these potential legal challenges? It does seem like it would be very difficult for them to change this result.
It would not only be difficult, there's really no factual or legal basis by which the president can do so. And basically, by saying stop the vote, stop the counts, he's just saying stop the democracy. He doesn't
If the elites in the media on both coasts don't listen to them, don't respect them, and don't think they should have a voice. And this is the problem, George. The problem that Joe Biden is going to find is that there's a large part of his party, and he said, I am the Democratic Party in one of the debates, but he's going to have to deal with folks like that who really use adjectives and words and phrases and emotion that they accuse the president of using. Because let me tell you something, if you had turned that diatribe around and made it anti-liberal rather than anti-Trump, you know, he would have accused the president of saying things like that. I think we need to be more respectful with each other's views. And there are 70 million people in this country who voted for Donald Trump on election day and in the weeks before. And so I think what Joe Biden needs to do is to close out the voices of those folks, or at least minimize them, and speak from his heart about being the American president. And I think if he does that, then he has a real chance to have those people listen and to have those people make judgments on his policies in a way that's fair and appropriate. But you know, that's to me, that's part of the problem. We have no reaction to that, no outrage to the language that was used there. I'm making my way into New York City now to come and join you in the studio, and listening to that, just made my blood boil, George. I'm not a bad person. I'm not a dumb person, and I voted for Donald Trump, and there's a lot of other people out there who did as well, and were thoroughly insulted by that diatribe, and it is indicative of what some people who have supported Vice President Biden think of those 70 million people who voted for Donald Trump.
Thank you, Chris. Rahm Emanuel, I think as this conversation unfolds, we get a sense of the magnitude of the challenge before Joe Biden right now.
You think? So one thing is, I think the way I look at this is Joe Biden was derided in the primary because he said there is a bipartisanship, there is decency with people that you don't initially on the face value agree with. He was derided in the primary, survived that. He was derided in the general election. And I keep coming back to this. It is not a throwback. He will be respectful of other views. He was like that in the White House.
He was actually, he was really criticized for that.
Well, I would say derided. Criticized is another word to describe it. I think he was more than that. I think he was ridiculed for it as just literally somebody from another era, didn't realize what had happened. The second thing is, look, in major moments in American history when you have the divisions bubble up to really explode, we've complimented a lot of people. I want to compliment the American people. They thought something was askew here. And not that people that voted for Trump, they thought something was off kilter and they brought it back on track. The other piece of this is Hillary Clinton ran, and in 2018 you had more women run than ever before. Now you have a woman vice president. We should not forget what she did to break all the shatters of glass. Barack Obama, the first African-American to make it to the White House, you could not even think of Kamala Harris on the ticket if he had not shattered that. And history moves that way and then cracks. And then the last thing, we keep talking about this division. We exacerbate it, I think, in the media. But life is complicated. Florida goes Republican and votes for a minimum wage. California, a major blue state, votes against gig employees and affirmative action in place employment. Life is not binary. It's more complicated than that. And I actually think Vice President Biden has a ability to try to, and what his history will be when you look at Abe Lincoln, you look at John Kennedy, will be to see a glimmer of decency in you and bring that forward. And I actually think for all of us who've lived, I think, in a very dark 4 years, this is going to be a relief. And my son, who was overseas when we were talking this morning, said, last night seeing Vice President Biden just reminded you what a president can sound like. And we've lost that, and we've lost it ourselves. And while Joe has the Vice President has a big role to play, Kamala, we have a role to play, not just the media, the American people. And my hope is that he keeps that engagement. We just had an election. The world watched. 160 million Americans exercise their right of citizenship. That is a great thing we should be proud of.
And you wonder, and I want to bring this to Sarah Fagan, can that behavior be modeled now in Washington, across Washington, if we have a different kind of president inside the White House? You know, Ron was talking about the women elected, the glass ceiling being broken, more Republican women elected to the House.
More Republican women. And you look, it's been a big success story for Republicans and obviously a big success story for Democrats, as we're seeing on our screen right now. And maybe somehow in that moment where really both parties won on Tuesday, that we can get back to some sort of normal governing structure. There are no doubt big divisions, and there are going to be big fights, including, you know, very quickly on another COVID relief package. But I think the first couple deals that happen really will set the tone and the tenor of how this is going to go. And so, you know, the president-elect would be wise to give a little on this and not demand so much as Nancy Pelosi has. And then the next time, Mitch McConnell's going to have to do the same. And if that can happen, we might be able to get back to a better structure.
Yvette Simpson, I know you come from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Is every side going to have to give a little?
I think certain sides have given a lot, you know, and I think the question is, how much more do we need to give? You know, I always say this: unity is great, but freedom is better. And there's a part of this population that has sacrificed their freedom time and time again for unity. And they're tired of it. Yes, we want to have compromise. Yes, we want bipartisanship, but it shouldn't cost people wages and health care and education. And so if you're asking us to come together, and that means that my world doesn't change, the people whose world needs to change doesn't change, I don't want that kind of unity. I want the kind of unity that leads to change for people who have waited for it. And if this pandemic hasn't showed us that we need to serve people first, and that needs to be a unifying message. The Republicans need to be on board with actually taking care of people. If we can unify around that, I'm all for it. But if that means that we're going to compromise and we're going to continue to serve the 1%, the people who we have always served, that's not the kind of unity we need right now.
Go ahead, Ron.
Look, the vice president, let's just go, but a little history, I think, will reveal the future. Bill Clinton runs on
worst things across the country. Almost 6,000 cases in Michigan on Thursday. We need to find a way. We need to take action as a country to get the virus under control, so we can get back to doing the things that we do best.
Thank you very much. So that's again one of the main things that were decisive in this election was the COVID virus. And Biden, when he was speaking late on Friday, alluded to the fact that he would be addressing that as soon as possible. In fact, he's met with a COVID task force at least twice in the past 48 hours, has spoken of not just trying to control the virus, but also looking at economic stimulus plan to help the country. We'll ask another person here about their feelings with this announcement. What are you feeling right now?
You know, I feel very, very good for my heart, because even me, myself, I'm an immigrant. I came in this country since 2006. Even though I voted for Biden, I'm an American citizen. Trump has made this country so difficult for even immigrants coming in this country. He has ruined this country, just even with tweets. He has made this country insecure for everyone. So right now, Biden winning this election has become one of the best things ever, because since Obama left office, we have seen nothing but chaos, nothing. And right now, we're so excited to receive a new president-elect and a vice president-elect as well.
All right, thank you very much. You know, there is a consistency in the messages that are coming from people who are extremely happy here by this announcement. Like I say, a lot of them are either talking about the COVID virus or talking about racial inequality and the systemic racism that exists in the country, something that was exacerbated by not only comments but policies of Donald Trump. And it's something that a lot of people are hoping with this new era under President-elect Joe Biden, that those damages, as they view it, or the damage that has been done as they view under Donald Trump, will be fixed somewhat.
Oh, Jamal, one of the striking things that I noticed there, just as you were speaking to those supporters, was that almost palpable sense of relief. And I wonder if that's even been heightened now because we didn't see that blue wave of votes that the polls predicted. Is there a sense there that people are just glad that it's over and that it is Biden?
For sure. I mean, I think the relief is more to do with the fact that a lot of people in the United States genuinely felt that Donald Trump was a threat to them, either personally, those who came from specific minority communities, or collectively when you're looking at the democratic process. And we even heard, for example, Nancy Pelosi referred to him as a threat on the country. But the relief of some sort of closure with an announcement, of course, is sure. But remember, there is still the fact that Trump himself refused to accept, or still refuses to accept this result, and there is still worry as to how this transition period will be. Let's maybe you'll see the camera just going. You'll see now a bit of chanting that's taking place. Gives you a bit of the atmosphere that's going on here. And one of the interesting things here, Nastasia, is the diversity that you see in this crowd. And it is something that has definitely helped Joe Biden win this election, that he was able to reach out to young and old, black and white, men and women. Obviously, the fact that he had somebody like Kamala Harris helped him greatly, the endorsement of former President Barack Obama too. And when you speak to these people, and we've been speaking about it ourselves in our coverages, as much as this is a victory for Joe Biden, as much as it is a defeat for Donald Trump, it is also a victory for Kamala Harris. It is a victory for the diversity and the opportunity that the United States has always prided itself in and claimed it's being a land of opportunity. Of course, that being said, there is no doubt that there are huge challenges that exist. There is specific discrimination that continues, that is endemic and systematic, as Biden himself has described it, in many of the state's institutions, in many states across the country. However, he has acknowledged their existence. He hasn't dismissed it or ignored it like Donald Trump has, as far as these people are concerned, and that is what gives them hope.
Well, you mentioned Kamala Harris there, obviously the first female vice president of the United States. How big is that for the crowd that you're speaking to there? Incredibly symbolic, but I imagine that an incredible source of inspiration to so many young women.
For sure. I mean, we were speaking to people who brought their children here, and they referred to that as that's something that has reinstilled hope to them. For a lot of people, it was difficult to, people always look to many people look to their country's leader as an example, or when they're raising their children will refer to it. Many Americans felt uneasy referring to somebody who had, recordings of him speaking extremely derogatory towards women, or who was seen to be as a racist. Therefore, having that symbol at least is something that is promising for a lot of people. But again, like we say, there was 8 years of Barack Obama, and as much as that instilled hope in a lot of people, it didn't dismantle a lot of the challenges that existed, not just for ethnic minorities, but also for others as well. So that is the feeling. I mean, we can go around and ask maybe some of the people here for their views about that and see what they say. I think these are some of the journalists actually. We'll ask here. Hello. How are you guys doing? I want to ask you, obviously everybody's here celebrating Biden's victory, but together with Biden, he had Kamala Harris also running for him. What does that mean to you, having the first female vice president, particularly somebody who comes from an ethnic minority background?
It feels outstanding to have that leadership, a Black vice president, female and Asian, and she's also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, in which I am a member of. So I am especially proud of her and the entire Biden administration. So it's just a proud day.
We've seen before Americans elect Barack Obama, we saw what that meant in terms of symbolism for those who were historically marginalized and oppressed, in fact. But even with those 8 years, there was still issues that exist. Do you feel that that challenge, and Biden speaking yesterday saying that there is systemic racism, there are things that need to be changed, how do you think he can go about by solving these issues?
Well, he's going to have to bring the country back together, because Trump spent 4 years tearing us apart. And the problems aren't going to go away, obviously. So he's going to have to address the systemic racism, the police brutality, the prison system. All of that has to be addressed.
And very quickly, just, Trump refuses to accept defeat. I know there's relief now that Biden has announced victory, but Are you worried that there could be some tension over the next couple of months?
I am not worried. It's been a tension for the last 4 years. We will endure this, and we will win because of the law and because of our Constitution. So we've been enduring this for 4 years, so this is nothing new. But we have won, and we will endure this moment.
Do you have a message for Donald Trump?
Get lost.
Well, very straight to the point there. There are some of the sentiments from the Biden supporters here. As I tell you, Nastasia, they are increasing in number and definitely increasing in their voices as well.
And we do expect to hear from Biden himself later. Jamal El-Shayal there on the ground for us in Delaware with all those celebrations. Thanks so much, Jamal. Well, speaking of Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, she will be the first woman, first South Asian, and first Black person to hold that office. And she learned that news while she was out jogging and was also one of the first to congratulate her running mate. Take a look.
We did it. We did it, Joe. You're going to be the next president of the United States.
Very happy Kamala Harris there. Well, joining us now is Claire Finkelstein, a professor of law and professor of philosophy and faculty director at the Center for Ethics and the Rule of Law at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. Thank you so much for being with us at this historic moment, Claire. Let me start by asking you, seeing as we just saw Kamala celebrate there, as a woman, what does that mean to you?
This is an incredible glass ceiling moment for all women everywhere, especially as a lawyer, to watch future Vice President Kamala Harris getting ready to step up to a role that no woman in this country has ever held, and especially as a woman of color, is incredibly exciting and inspiring to all of us.
Claire, I don't want to put a damper on things, but we obviously have been hearing from the Trump campaign that they are refusing to concede, that they are going to pursue this litigation in Pennsylvania, that they're going to take up other unspecified litigation on Monday. What do you make of that? And is there a threat here that this could drag on for weeks, that the results could be brought into doubt?
As disconcerting as all the litigation has been, one has to understand that it's, in a way, a sign of health of our democracy. If Donald Trump is willing to accept the deliverances of our court system, then in effect he is willing to play by the rules. As obstreperous as he is, as angry and as unwilling to accept the results as he has been, if a court rules against him and he accepts it, then we are still roughly within the domain of the rule of law. My fear is, what if he in the end does not accept it? That poses an enormous national security risk for our country if we have a lame duck president who, over the transition period in which much needs to happen to effectuate a peaceful transition of power, if he remains recalcitrant, if he refuses to accept all of the results of the legal challenges that he mounts, and they will not go in his favor, what then? Do we continue to have a president right up until noon on January 20th who has the codes to the nuclear launch, to the nuclear football? Do we continue to allow him to be briefed on all sorts of national security issues? Does he continue to represent the United States when he is not committed to the democratic process by which our country defines itself? That is an issue we have really never confronted before in this country, and it will set the tone for the rest of the country and for his supporters. So it is vitally important that President Trump get on this bandwagon, figure out that he has lost sometime in the next few weeks, and announce his concession. It's also critical that those who surround him, the members of his cabinet, strike that tone which will help him to make that transition. I think particularly of the Attorney General, William Barr, who has been willing to go to all lengths to distort the law in favor of Donald Trump. He now needs to come clean and say that all Americans have to accept this result, and that includes Donald Trump.
You mentioned there that if Donald Trump respects the rule of law, in some ways, it's a vindication of the American democratic process. Given everything that's been said, all the rhetoric that we've been hearing in the lead up to the election, during the vote counting, do you think that the legitimacy of this process has ever been brought into doubt? And I ask that because so much of that is about perception, particularly by Trump supporters. And if you have nearly 70 million people in the country who don't agree that this process was legitimate, then there's a much bigger issue on your hands.
We have seen an incredible corruption of our democratic institutions over the course of the past 4 years. We have seen an attorney general who is willing to use the powers of his office to go after political opponents of Donald Trump's and to use his power to cut lenient deals and side with those who are willing to help Donald Trump cover up his offenses. We have seen a Senate with Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who was willing to use the powers of his office to engage in behaviors that damage our institutions, such as the Supreme Court and the impeachment process. But now the voters have spoken, and there is no evidence of fraud in the election. And if Donald Trump keeps saying that there is evidence of fraud, he will damage one of the important safeguards that has finally worked in this process. Even Mitch McConnell has called for a peaceful transition of power and has said that we ought to accept the results of the election. So it's time for our system to show that it can work and for all Americans to accept that, however disappointed they may be in the results.
Let me take a step back here, Claire, and ask you about how you think this is being viewed abroad. Because obviously the world is watching this incredibly, incredibly closely. And one of the big bastions of US identity for so many years has been the democratic process. What do you think foreign leaders are thinking now as they're watching all of this unfold?
I think they're enormously relieved, all except maybe Vladimir Putin, because Donald Trump has not only attacked our former allies and sided with Putin in trying to damage the NATO alliance, trying to damage our European partners who have been so important in helping to secure democracy across the globe. He has coddled dictators and really reversed our traditional forms of diplomacy and interaction with foreign leaders. It's going to take a lot of work to get our democracy and our diplomatic processes and relationships back on track. That's not something that's going to happen overnight, but I think this is a chance to start rebuilding some of the former alliances that were so critical. There will be very confusing aspects of this. For example, what do we do with our relationship with Iran? Is Biden going to go back and try to restore the Iran deal that Obama put in place and that took so much time and energy and diplomacy during his presidency? How will we treat Russia, for example, which interfered in our last presidential election, in the midterms, tried to interfere in this case, but was not able to throw the results. So there is going to be a lot of changing foreign policy, and that can't all be done in one moment. It's going to take a very, very good foreign policy team. Biden's going to need every bit of help that he can get from the professionals that I know he can call on.
Claire Finkelstein there, the faculty director at the Center for Ethics and the Rule of Law at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. Thanks so much for being with us in this moment here on Al Jazeera, Claire. Well, it seems like a very good time to go live now to our diplomatic editor, James Bays, who is in New York, and will talk us through some of the international reaction that we are seeing to Joe Biden's victory. So, James, are we...
They couldn't breathe.
Dan, what are your thoughts?
It's well, it's easier to be a parent this morning. It's easier to be a dad. It's easier to tell your kids character matters. It matters. Telling the truth matters. Being a good person matters. And it's easier for a whole lot of people. If you're Muslim in this country, you don't have to worry if the president doesn't want you here. If you're an immigrant, you don't have to worry if the president's going to be happy to have babies snatched away or send dreamers.
Dan, what are your thoughts?
It's Well, it's easier to be a parent this morning. It's easier to be a dad. It's easier to tell your kids character matters. It matters. Telling the truth matters. Being a good person matters. And it's easier for a whole lot of people. If you're Muslim in this country, you don't have to worry if the president doesn't want you here. If you're an immigrant, you don't have to worry if the president's going to be happy to have babies snatched away or send dreamers back for no reason. This is vindication for a lot of people who have really suffered. You know, the I can't breathe. You know, that wasn't just George Floyd. That was a lot of people that felt that they couldn't breathe. Every day you're waking up and you're getting these tweets and you just don't know. And you're going to the store and people who have been afraid to show their racism are getting nastier and nastier to you. And you're worried about your kids and you're worried about your sister. And can she just go to Walmart and into her car without somebody saying something to her? And you spent so much of your life energy just trying to hold it together. And this is a big deal for us just to be able to get some peace and have a chance for a reset. And the character of the country matters. And being a good man matters. You know, I just want my sons to look at this. Look at this. You know, it's easy to do it the cheap way and get away with stuff, but it comes back around. It comes back around. And this is a good day for this country. I'm sorry for the people who lost. For them, it's not a good day. But for a whole lot of people, it's a good day. Gloria?
You know, and as long as I've been covering politics, we talk about character. In a lot of campaigns, character didn't count. Other things mattered more. And I always ask myself this question, this race, would character matter? Would values matter? Would that go to the top of the list? And COVID became part of that, became part of the character issue, how you handle something that has killed more than 200,000 people in this country. It became a matter of character and values. And you look at Joe Biden, and that is who he is. He's a man of empathy. You can disagree with him on all this, you know, politically, you can say he's a socialist, which of course he isn't. He was very hard for Republicans to pigeonhole because he's had more than 4 decades in public service in which he refused to be pigeonholed. And what's so fascinating about what's going to occur is that during the campaign, or at least early on in the campaign, we always heard Joe Biden talk about himself as a transitional candidate because he is old. Now, as a president, he's going to have to be transformational because so much needs to be done in this country, whether it's about COVID, whether it's about the economy, whether it's about race, whether it's about climate. You can go down the list. So this man who was the youngest man, one of the youngest, I should say, ever elected to the United States Senate, will now be the oldest man ever to take the presidential oath. Think of that. Think of that.
First of all, let me say, watching Wolf make that announcement threw me back to when I was in the war room in 2008 at the campaign headquarters, and I heard him say the words that Barack Obama would be president of the United States, and I was overwhelmed with emotion. I'm sure that's the feeling of people over in Biden's headquarters and many people across the country. And Van just so eloquently and movingly expressed that. Joe Biden, we tend to correct in our elections for the deficiencies of the person in that office. And in this case, those deficiencies went to character, went to decency, went to a lack of empathy. And these are qualities, as Gloria said, that Joe Biden has in abundance. And that made him the right candidate to run against Donald Trump. I think when he said last night that he wanted to bring the country together, that he wanted to be the president of all Americans, that he fundamentally believes that. He grew up that way in politics. But we should also recognize today, and I'm sure Rick will speak to this, that there are a lot of Americans who think that will see this as a gut punch because we are in a very divided country. And for all the tasks that Joe Biden faces now, President-elect Biden, whether it's dealing with the virus or dealing with the economy or myriad other problems, the greatest challenge is going to be to deal with a deeply divided country and try and find a common language and a common set of concerns that we can work on together, even if we disagree on many, many issues. And that, I so fervently hope for the country that he is successful in moving us forward in that way. And a common set of concerns that we can work on together, even if we disagree.
Hello, Abuna.
Good evening.
يا مرحبا.
عندنا هنا طبعا good morning. It's a good morning in
Even me here 4 a.m. Good morning Nongan.
It's good morning here in North America. طبعا هنا عندنا هسه الساعة 12.
Okay. I came حاملينكم. How are you doing? Hello? Can you reduce the...
I mute that.
Yeah, mute that one, yeah. Yeah, thank you so much, Abuna John, for tuning in. You have seen you have watched, witnessed the history that has happened in the United States America election today. What do you think in this very divisive country? How the American will wake up on Monday or later on when Donald Trump is refusing to concede the election?
Okay, first of all, let me say thank you, Brother Isaac. First of all, today is the 7th, which is the Saturday here in North America. It's afternoon actually. Today now is afternoon, about noon hours. And all American or all North American people are awake. So the witness is from first minute to this moment. First of all, it was this election in 2020. It was very, very, very depressed election.
Correct.
And it's going to go down like COVID-19.
Yes.
Since there is this year 2020 is registered history after the history. And for me, for my witness, is the first election that give a lot of people in North America, Canada, and
yeah, it's all right. Carry on, talk. I'm just putting the images. What is happening?
Some of the things that they never experienced before. That the people will go to the chaos, which is never happened in the United States for 224 years. Why? Because there is somebody is not want to accept the reality of, or don't want to accept the people voice.
The voices of people,
The voice of the people, the voice of the people. People are listening. People are hearing everything every day.
Correct.
And this gentleman is feeding us with a lot of crops, a lot of stuff that we don't need. That we don't need. And most importantly, and that's very threat, the country is divided.
Correct.
He want to take us back to 60s, where people are being categorized. This is black, and this is white,
this
and this
white,
is
Latino, and this is Asian,
Arab countries, and all these kind of crops.
By the name. Yep.
People left those things behind.
Even the gender.
Yes.
Ladies and men.
So this we have to pray for our brothers and sisters in the South. We call them the South here in Canada. We call them South, our brothers and sisters in the South. We call them big brothers. Pray for them so they can have peace. They have our brother Joseph can have a good transition, and he's very calm guy. You know, he's a very calm guy. First of all, he's not perfect. First of all, is not strong, like when you're going to drive things crazy. Is not weak, but he's a gentleman. This gentleman called Joe Biden is a gentleman. Gentleman, you can appreciate is the way he act, the way he do the thing, because in his position, and he's humble in his position, he might not even accept to be a vice president to Barack Obama.
Correct.
There is nothing. There is nothing can pose him to be a vice president to Barack Obama, because Barack Obama is a young boy. For him.
And he first in 1980 he has attempted.
In politics, Barack Obama is a junior. He's a junior boy in politics. But because he's a humble guy, he accept. Welcome. He accept this. He accept, to be a vice president to black guy, to black man. Yes. And you work with him without any confusion for 8 years.
For 8 years.
And that's why you can see Barack Obama, he owed this guy. He owed Joseph, he owed Biden. Because Barack Obama, you cannot see the president of the United States come out and go to a campaign trial. Never happened in history. Because there is something wrong happening. And that's why you can see the former president come out and say, you know what, enough is enough.
Exactly.
You can see why now the Georgia is flipping because of this gentleman called Barack Obama. Okay, you can see now, Arizona is flipping to a blue wave because of this gentleman called Barack Obama. Why? Because his relationship that he made with John McCain. Relationship that he made with John McCain until John McCain make a recommendation. If there is somebody going to do brushing for me, it's going to be Barack Obama.
Exactly.
Barack Obama lead a wonderful tribute to John McCain in Arizona when he died.
Funeral.
And because of that, you can see the family of John McCain today. They were Republican. Now today, Cindy John McCain now is a Democrat. You can see that. This country, Georgia or Arizona, there is not any Democrat can even dream about it. But now it's flipping to a blue wave. The masala here is not a blue wave or a red wave. Masala here, there is something wrong happening in the United States.
Yes, it's something that he himself has created it. It's
something wrong is happening in the United States. And that's something wrong is happening in the United States. We as a minister, we can see there is injustice going on.
Yes, yeah.
And I was actually very unfortunate to see my brothers in the Midwest voted overwhelmingly to this guy. And I was asking myself, what is wrong with this guy? Those are Kansas, those of North Dakota here, those of South Dakota here, all those Midwest. You can see the vote overwhelmingly. Come on, man. This is not even fair.
Yeah, you're right, Abuna. Thank you so much for the analysis you have made. The point that you have figured out, these are the realities. That's what has made Donald Trump to lose, to be the one-term president of the United States of America. Because of his attitudes and how he handled the issues, how he handled COVID-19 in the country, and not sticking on one point, because he can say this today, tomorrow will say the other one, and the other next day will be different. So that thing is very confusing to the people that you are leading.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
The leader needs to speak one message and stick to it and do it. Let it be seen, not to just jump side by side. My brother Abraham did. Good morning. How are you?
Abraham Salam.
Yeah, hi. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good evening.
He's a diehard of Joe Biden.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening, Abuna. So,
Hi, Salam.
yeah, it's a good day, guys. It's a good day. It's a good day. You know,
Yeah,
we
morning,
work.
morning to me here.
Yeah, it's evening. It's about 1 p.m. to us here. So, you know, it's a good time that I want to do our congratulations to our president-elect Joe Biden. So Joe Biden would bring America together. It will unite the country together. So now we just, as an American citizen and as a Democrat, I just want to call out that we need all the citizens of America, that people who were, it's a time for healing. It's time the country need to heal. So we're celebrating, but we need to heal from all this political division among Republican and Democrat. You know, but American people, they've spoken. They know what they were doing to elect by president-elect now, Joe Biden, to be the next president for the next 4 years. So, you know, and as we talk as a South Sudan, I just hear what Abuna say about some of the South Sudanese in the West. You know, my network is very bad, and I'm in the car.
I know.
I don't know. Maybe it will break. You guys can hear me?
It's all right.
We can hear you. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the reason why, you know, Midwest, some of the South Sudanese American would like to vote for President Trump is simple, because, you know, some of our South Sudanese, they feel like that the reason why President Trump, they're supporting President Trump, is because they are not, President Trump is not involved to the foreign policy. For example, he is not get involved into South Sudan issues, you know. So his slogan or his campaign always put America first. Yeah. So, and this is the reason why some of the South Sudanese Americans, they feel like, okay, but Joe Biden, President Trump is right president, but they haven't seen the other side of coin. What happening? Because as you can see, America has divided into. So, and this is the time we need a person like Joe Biden to unite America, to be bring people together. So, and as you guys can see, everybody's come out on the street celebrating, because America they tied for the last 4 years. They got enough. So I just want to say that's a good, and I hope Joe Biden is a good person. So he will do a great to America and to around the world, because America is one of the greatest countries on earth, and that is I'm really happy that Joe Biden is the next president. So go Joe.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. There is the CNN reporter, which is one of the CNN presenter called Van Jones. He fight back tears. That even it made me emotional of his what he has been struggling with. His speech is really very emotional. Let me just bring him and we listen to his words. What made him to be very emotional? So,
Yeah, you know, let me add that thing. Yeah, before you play that, the reason why, you know, this, if you guys can see this election, it's not just an election to vote President Trump out from the office, but this election is historically election. It's like 2018, 2008 when we elect President Obama. See?
yes.
So my point is here: the vice president, the first time in American history to elect the vice president as a woman, and also has Asian African American to be the vice president.
Yeah.
This is the historical, and I think, and I feel what that person was, Joseph fighting back was here, because this is a historically time, guys, in America, because
And
the
the
lady was first,
police brutality also is another issue. He said that he need his son to be feeling happy and free, that if the father is going out, he will come back safely home. So
okay, so you guys go ahead. My phone here is dying. It's out of power. So good. Yeah, go ahead. Play that.
Okay.
Well, it's easier to be a parent this morning. It's easier to be a dad. It's easier to tell your kids character matters. It matters. Telling the truth matters. Being a good person matters. And it's easier for a whole lot of people. If you're Muslim in this country, you don't have to worry if the president doesn't want you here. If you're an immigrant, you don't have to worry if the president's going to be happy to have babies snatched away or send dreamers back for no reason. It's a vindication for a lot of people who have really suffered. I can't breathe. That wasn't just George Floyd. There's a lot of people that felt they couldn't breathe. Every day you're waking up, you're getting these tweets and you just don't know. And you're going to the store and people who have been afraid to show their racism are getting nastier and nastier to you. And you're worried about your kids and you're worried about your sister. And can she just go to Walmart and get back into her car without somebody saying something to her? And you spend so much of your life energy trying to hold it together. And this is a big deal for us just to be able to get some peace and have a chance for a reset. And the character of the country matters. And being a good man matters. I just want my sons to look at this. Look at this. It's easy to do it the cheap way and get away with stuff, but it comes back around. It comes back around. And this is a good day for this country. I'm sorry for the people who lost. For them, it's not a good day. But for a whole lot of people, it's a good day. Gloria?
And as long as I've been covering politics, we talk about character. And a lot of campaigns, character didn't count. Other things mattered more. And I always ask myself this question, this race, would character matter? Would values matter? Would that go to the top of the list? And COVID became part of that, became part of the character issue, how you handle something that has killed more than 200,000 people in this country. It became a matter of character and values. And you look at Joe Biden, and that is who he is. He's a man of empathy. You can disagree with him on all this, politically, you can say he's a socialist, which of course he isn't. He was very hard for Republicans to pigeonhole because he's had more than 4 decades in public service in which he refused to be pigeonholed. And what's so fascinating about what's going to occur is that during the campaign, or at least early on in the campaign, we always heard Joe Biden talk about himself as a transitional candidate because he is old. Now, as a president, he's going to have to be transformational because so much needs to be done in this country, whether it's about COVID, whether it's about the economy, whether it's about race, whether it's about climate. You can go down the list. So this man who was the youngest man, I guess I should say, ever elected to the United States Senate, will now be the oldest man ever to take the presidential oath.
That's America.
Think of that. Think of that.
David?
First of all, let me say, watching Wolf make that announcement threw me back to when I was in the war room in 2008 at the campaign headquarters, and I heard him say the words that Barack Obama would be president of the United States, and I was overwhelmed with emotion. I'm sure that's the feeling of people over in Biden's headquarters and many people across the country. And Van just so eloquently and movingly expressed that. Joe Biden, we tend to correct in our elections for the deficiencies of the person in that office. And in this case, those deficiencies went to character, went to decency, went to a lack of empathy. And these are qualities, as Gloria said, that Joe Biden has in abundance. And that made him the right candidate to run against Donald Trump. I think when he said last night that he wanted to bring the country together, that he wanted to be the president of all Americans, that he fundamentally believes that. He grew up that way in politics. But we should also recognize today, and I'm sure Rick will speak to this, that there are a lot of Americans who think that will see this as a gut punch, because we are in a very divided country. And for all the tasks that Joe Biden faces now, President-elect Biden, whether it's dealing with the virus or dealing with the economy or myriad other problems, the greatest challenge is going to be to deal with a deeply divided country and try and find a common language and a common set of concerns that we can work on together, even if we disagree on many, many issues. And that, I so fervently hope for the country that he is successful in moving us forward in that way.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, let me dim this. Let me stop this.
Yeah.
Brother Isaac.
Yeah, Buna Joseph, yeah, John.
John. Awal haja, let us say congratulations to brother to Joe Biden. Let him say congratulations to him. He did a very good job. And he did try it because we all in North America and around the world, we were witnessing day by day, seeing the brother Donald Trump elected to be a president of the United States. He turned the world upside down. Not because of anything, is because of when he came in with his own idea that there is people that are not worth it, and there is people are worth it.
Yes.
And that's very dangerous. And it began in day one. And it began in day one. He bring a rally, and he tried to dispute that his rally and his supporters is the biggest supporters ever happened in the world, which was not true.
Yeah.
Which was not true. And he started doing that day by day.
Yeah.
If you can see Brother Van Jones.
Yes.
Van Jones, when you see him, very emotional.
Yeah.
Because he said, this is a good day.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
What it mean by good day is that all the crap, all the confusion, and all the fear and threat will stop from today.
They will go away.
Number two, he said, now I can say it's easy to the parent to say to your son or to your daughter, go out and you will come back safe.
Yes.
Because, and he add to that people from day one, since this guy come in, people cannot breathe.
Yes. So now
that's what happened. Yes, people cannot breathe. That's exactly what happened to Floyd. Floyd, he was crying out, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, until he died.
Yeah.
8 minutes later.
And he did not condemn that.
And he never even say a word about it.
Yes.
Okay? He been tried to appreciate the police.
Yeah.
about
Even
the
in-
good work he's doing. Brothers,
I remember there is a video. He was invited in one of the graduation of the police. When he was addressing them, he told them that you are even nicer to this criminal. You put your hand in the head of the criminal to say that don't hit your head when you are putting them in the car after they handcuff them. You handcuff them and just point them in the car. If he hit his head, it doesn't happen. Can the head of his say
yeah,
such a thing?
and he forgot that any criminal around the world, he can be free until he was being charged.
Yes, to be.
You cannot charge somebody just because you accuse him, and then you can make him as a criminal right away. You will give him a chance to prove you prove your charges, and then after that you make it as a criminal.
This is where you will be.
And it's not a police job, and it's not your job as a president. It is a job of the prosecutors, and it's a job of a judge.
Yes.
Those are the two people can do that. So, and that's why you can see my brother here, Van Dorn.
Very emotional. Very emotional.
And is reporting all the accident day by day. And he's afraid for his own son and his own children.
Yes.
Because he knew it's his own son. Because there is a standard, it's not even standard. There is a fear. If a black son, or if you are whatever your position as a black in United States and you're driving a nice car, the police will stop you. And when the police stop you, try to make sure you're holding the two hands on your steering wheel.
Yes.
And don't try to move.
Or move, that's it. They shoot you straight up.
Don't try to move. No matter who you are, whether you are a senator of the Capitol Hill, doesn't matter. Don't move.
Correct.
And when you come out with your hand like that. So that's the kind of fear people have.
Yeah.
And now people having a hope that Joe Biden will help to change that kind of fear. And that's why you can see my brother here have a very emotion. And then another thing that I want to mention before I stop, Joe Biden actually want to make a history too.
Yeah.
When he choose his running mate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
His running mate as a woman. Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is a black.
Yes.
And actually you grow up in 60s. When the people are sitting in the bus, that is where the white sit in the front and the black kids sit. Yeah. She is still in that. And that's why now for her is waving, is kind of taking the back black history that, dark history. You can't try to work on it because you will work on it. And then another thing, she is the first black woman become a vice president ever in the United States. You see? And then not alone is first women become a vice president in the United States. So that's the kind of thing that you can see Joe Biden brought in with him. And that's why you can see the celebration on the street right now. You see people get out because they are very happy. People are very happy and they were very, very excited about what is happening. So brothers, I'm going to let you go. And it's a good show. And I'm congratulating the people of the United States about the best thing they do to make some change. Because you can see the Biden yesterday when he was speaking, he's not declaring the victory. He said, let the process and let the democratic process go.
Continue, yes. Until
and people of the United States, please stay calm. And he meant that he have a mandate. He have a mandate. Yes, he have a mandate 74 million people of the United States vote for him. He has a mandate, but he's not going to declare that before the process of the election go.
You see,
count every vote.
The
That's
Prime
the
Minister
kind
of Canada has already sent in the message of congratulations, and Prime Minister of Maurice Johnson of England, British, also sent their congratulations messages to President Joe Biden. And he will not accept that. He's still waiting. Don't need to.
It is up to him. It is up to him. It is not. It is not. We cannot change him. It is that Donald Trump.
President has Joe Biden.
That's Donald Trump. Donald Trump is Donald Trump. You cannot change him. That's his attitude. That is the way of doing things. You cannot change him, brothers. And that's the thing. So the only thing now, when we can realize now, how did he going to come out from White House?
Yeah, that's the. That's what everybody thinking. Others, they say that send the police in to move him out by force.
Because the only thing that the Capitol Hill is going to sit down and call the FBI, please remove there is a strange resident in White House. He had to go out from the White House.
so many head of state of different countries, they send in their congratulatory messages.
Yes, they have to. They have to respect the voice of the people. They have to.
That is the democracy. That is the meaning of democracy.
Yeah, because otherwise they're going to be insulting over 4 million people that voted, to defeat Donald Trump. Because 4 million people are voted to defeat who? To defeat Trump. So that has to be respected.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Anyway, you just continue. If I have a time later, I will join you. But you continue enjoying your.
Yeah. It's already morning hours. I want to go back to bed again. I will just stay awake here until I hear from Joe Biden. He will come up around 8 o'clock in where he is now to address the nation. He will address people. So thank you, Abuna John. Shukran for being with us. God bless you.
I will be engaged with you regarding that and.
No worries. Yeah.
To the court system.
Well, a number of the legal experts that we've had on literally in the last hour have said that there's very little evidence and very little basis potentially for those legal challenges. And if they do go ahead, they're unlikely to actually change the outcome, given that votes were cast and votes are being counted. Are you confident that there could be a potentially different result?
Well, I would say that the courts should decide that, not me or not the legal analysts that are on TV. That's up for the active judges and the active courts. The key issue with Pennsylvania, of course, was a number of ballots that were accepted after Election Day. They were supposed to be postmarked by the post office on or before November 3rd, but the state Supreme Court allowed them to come in for days afterwards. So that's one key issue I think is important in Pennsylvania. Another key legal challenge in Pennsylvania was that the voting rolls had 21,000 dead people on them. And we saw millions of ballots come in by the mail. So, I mean, it's hard to come to grips with it now until we dig through all the votes. But even in Pennsylvania alone, we're talking about almost 7 million votes. At the end of the day, I think that the coronavirus caused the rules of the game to be changed with mail-in voting throughout the country, with tens of millions of ballots that came in with very little very few mechanisms to see if those are actually accurate. So coronavirus really had a huge impact on this election.
It certainly did, but Mr. Gordon, we will wait to see, obviously, what happens in the coming days and what evidence is brought before the courts. But there were multiple investigations done into potential vote fraud in the United States, including one under the Trump administration, and that all came up with nothing, that there was no vote fraud in the United States. And we know that Donald Trump himself and the First Lady vote by mail, which suggests that they have some confidence in the process. Let me ask you about the transition of power here, because we've obviously heard no concession from President Trump, and there are concerns that this might get very, very messy indeed. Are you concerned about the process in the next days and weeks to come?
Yes, I am concerned because I think people are celebrating too prematurely. While there are still legal challenges in the courts in 4 different states, in Georgia, for instance, one of the larger states, that Biden has overtaken Trump in the vote tally. Well, the Secretary of State for Georgia said they're going to have a recount. So while you have things like recounts and legal challenges, the Supreme Court has already been involved in the case of Pennsylvania, and things haven't been settled yet. I'm concerned that people are going to get too excited. President Trump is not going to say, oh, yes, I've lost and I'm leaving. I don't think that's going to happen soon. I'm concerned with violence in the streets from people who get too excited too early.
Let me ask you finally then, if this does go to the courts and the courts decide that this result is upstanding and that we are seeing a President-elect Joe Biden, would you advise President Donald Trump to concede and also to call on his supporters to refrain from any unrest and ensure a peaceful transition of power?
Well, it's not the Trump supporters I'm worried about that are going to burn cities down. That was the far left people that have been really seen a lot of Democrats make apologies for, that have been engaged in the looting and burning of businesses. That wasn't Trump supporters. So I'm a little concerned with some of the Biden supporters who may just get too excited too fast and want Trump gone right away. You see them outside of the White House now dancing and celebrating, and I think that's harmful for the country. They need to wait and see the system play out. In 2000 in Florida, it did go to the Supreme Court, and it wasn't decided for well over a month after Election Day that Al Gore had lost. It came down to a lot fewer votes, of course, less than 1,000, but that process took about 5 weeks. Here, we're just a few days after the election.
Well, Mr. Gordon, I'm sure we will wait to see what the courts say and wait for those counts to be completed. But I also do want to point out that the crowds that you're referring to outside the White House at the moment are very peacefully celebrating. And obviously, violence that's been committed during protests and in the aftermath of protests have not necessarily been from just protesters, but from people on very different sides of the political spectrum as well. J.D. Gordon there, a former Pentagon spokesman speaking to us from Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us here on Al Jazeera, sir. Well, former President Barack Obama has tweeted his support for his former Vice President Joe Biden. He released a statement just a short while ago saying that he cannot be prouder to congratulate the next President Joe Biden and the next First Lady Jill Biden. He has also congratulated Kamala Harris for her groundbreaking election as America's next vice president. He also outlined the many challenges that Biden will be facing after he officially becomes a president: a raging coronavirus pandemic and, quote, an unequal economy, justice system and democracy at risk, and a climate at peril. Well, Joe Biden is expected to address the nation in the coming hours, but before that, he has tweeted that he is honored that America has chosen him to lead. He says the work ahead will be hard, but he promised to be a president for all Americans, those who voted for him and those who didn't. And he's promised to keep the faith that you have placed in him. Well, let's bring in Philip Santoso. He's a professor of political science at Duke University. Thank you for being with us, sir. Let me start with this sentiment around unity. Obviously, we're looking at an incredibly divided America right now. Where do you begin if you're Joe Biden trying to bring people together?
I think that is a very difficult task that the President-elect Biden is going to face, because America has been polarized for I would say 10, 20 years. Even though Republicans and Democrats, they are living in the same country, they are receiving different set of news. They are receiving different sets of messages from different news media, from their political parties. So for President-elect Biden to call for unity, I think there is a almost impossible task for him to achieve in a very short period of time. He needs patience. He also needs to be able to work together with what probably is going to be a Republican Senate majority. He's going to be willing to work together with Leader McConnell in terms of pursuing common agenda, common policies. And one thing that he's going to be careful about is from the pressure from the far left, which is going to isolate himself from the middle of America. So, to be honest, the question of bringing people together, of uniting Americans, is going to be a very difficult challenge, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's going to take a long, long time because, frankly, conservatives, liberal, Democrats, Republicans, they are practically living in a two separate world, and it's going to be very difficult to bridge them together.
Well, for people outside the country who are watching all of this take place, foreign leaders, foreign countries, everyone's obviously been watching this election very closely indeed. What do you think foreign leaders will be looking for as we go into this potential transition period?
Well, some of them might be breathing a sigh of relief. Some of them might be thinking what is going to be the path forward, because Donald Trump has been a transformative figure in transforming American foreign policy. Before President Trump, we have Obama administration, Bush administration, and Clinton, who is trying to assert American involvement in the international world order. And Trump reversed those calls by focusing more towards American first, of nationalistic, populist policies. So some foreign leaders might be alienated by those policies that President Trump has adopted in the last 4 years.
As a lame duck president.
In the middle of a crisis. I mean, one of the things in 5 days, we've gone from an average of just under 100,000 cases. We're sitting at 126,000 a day. We might be at 200,000 before Thanksgiving. Are we really going to have this lame duck period where we just sit back and wait for a new Congress and a new president? Or are we going to see something? I mean, that cooperation, to me, that is the most critical near-term issue, which is managing the pandemic and this transition.
Managing the pandemic and also getting COVID relief. I mean, this is something Republicans and Democrats, Casey, you know it so well, have been fighting over, hoping that the election would resolve it one way or the other. But it's ironically, the election just asserts that it's divided government.
That's absolutely right. I mean, we're still waiting ultimately on the outcome of the Senate. It's possible it could go either way. But in the meantime, while there are so many Americans waiting for relief, Republicans are going to control the Senate. I do think there is a significant appetite in Congress, to Chuck's point, to do something, to get a big sweeping piece of legislation. But the president's unpredictability is just an incredible X factor.
Casey, don't the Senate runoffs here, if you're Mitch McConnell, you don't want to suddenly have more gridlock in the midst of what is going to turn into this national fight for control of the Senate in 2 months, down in one state that, oh, by the way, is moving against the Republicans. If you're Mitch McConnell, you want to make COVID relief not an issue.
The incentives are lined up to do something.
And I think also you're going to see, we've been told there are going to be some important cabinet changes. The Pentagon, the defense secretary may be fired or resign before he can be fired. That is our reporting, as well as possible executive orders. There's a lot on the intelligence front. There's a lot that President Trump can do in the next 2 months.
How much can President-elect Biden, reach across the aisle, olive branch? How much will the left of his party allow him to build a bridge? I think
in the interim that he has free running. I want to say one other thing quickly about Kamala Harris. She identified as a young woman of mixed background as Black. She went to an historically Black college. This is an enormously important moment for Howard University and all the other historically Black colleges, for AKA, for the Black sororities. There is a cultural phenomenon now in the White House that we have never seen before, this high profile at the highest levels of government, and that is going to be felt. Just think of the example, the role modeling for Black women, Black girls Black men and boys.
I've talked to Dr.
throughout
Frederick of
America.
Howard University about this.
Exactly. I remember that interview on Meet the Press.
This is just so important. It means so much to Howard. It means so much to these institutions. And this just could be such an interesting moment for these institutions to really thrive in this generation with Kamala Harris as sort of this North Star.
And there's been a lot of fear in the Black community over the last 4 years. And this, I think, provides some hope, Kamala Harris's role.
Let's go to Kristen Welker, who, of course, is at Biden headquarters this morning. Kristen, we should get you in on this conversation. The question of what kind of governing agenda Biden will feel he has. We, made the observation that at the moment the election stands for Joe Biden being elected president and Republicans gaining seats in the House and the Senate in suspended animation. Will it end up being controlled by Republicans or Democrats? How does that dynamic affect what Joe Biden wants to do and who he chooses for his cabinet, for his Secretary of State, for his Secretary of Defense, and so on?
Well, he certainly isn't going to be able to choose people who will be flashpoints, given what our understanding of the makeup of Congress and the Senate will be. Savannah, you're absolutely right about that. When you think about his agenda, though, let's tick through some of the key things that he wants to accomplish. He's talked about criminal justice reform, addressing the protests and the core issues of those protesters, barring chokeholds, for example, for police officers. He's talked about building on Obamacare. Now, that gets very complicated because remember, the Supreme Court is going to hear a case about Obamacare, could potentially overturn it. He's talked about rebuilding Obamacare. This was one of the questions I asked him during the debate. What do you do if it gets tossed out? How do you rebuild that when your plan really focuses on starting from where we are right now? So that could be a real challenge, and he's going to have to work with Congress on that. And then think about his climate change plan. This is a $2 trillion plan. He says it's going to bring thousands of jobs. It's going to add to the U.S. economy. He says it's a jobs plan. That's how he's selling this. But if you are Republicans, if you're concerned about running up the deficit, it's going to be very hard to get them on board. And then, of course, what we've been seeing in recent weeks on Capitol Hill, the fact that they are stalled over COVID relief, that they haven't been able to get COVID relief through, despite the fact that so many Americans feel as though they are struggling right now economically. They want their kids to get back to school. He's going to have to tackle all of this. Now, we know that he and Senator Harris had a briefing on the economy and on COVID earlier this week. He's made the point that while this race was not called, he was going to get to work because he was so confident that ultimately he would be named president-elect. But all of these different agenda items that I lay out are very tough to get through a divided Congress.
Sorry, Kristen, let me jump in here because we have breaking news out of the White House. We haven't heard from the president. Hallie, what do you got?
Well, it's a fairly lengthy statement, Savannah, Chuck, and Lester. It is about 3.5 paragraphs. I won't read the entire thing, but I will read you some highlights, which is that the president is suggesting that Joe Biden is rushing to falsely pose as the winner and that the president is alleging his media allies are trying hard to help him, insisting the election is far from over. This is, frankly, the statement that I think many of the president's critics and even some around him expected him to put out when the race was ultimately called as the direction it appeared to be heading in over the last 24 hours or so for Joe Biden. The president is resisting the results of the election, despite the fact that there has been no widespread evidence of fraud. He is insisting that he will continue moving forward with legal challenges in the courts, and he is blaming, as he has often done over the last 4 years that he's been in office, the news media for something that he simply does not like. The president, as we mentioned, is currently on his golf course. As I'm going through the rest of the statement, the president insists he's not going to rest until the American people have what he describes as an honest vote count. Again, this election process has worked exactly as expected. It took a little while. We knew it was going to take a little while. As Chuck knows, we knew it was going to take a while because of all those mail-in ballots, the ballots that in some states have been gone through. There will be recount fights likely. The Trump campaign has already threatened to do a recount in Wisconsin. We know that's where Georgia has been headed. But this is President Trump, true to what we have seen from him since the campaign started for him back in 2015, 2016, defiant even in the face of the reality that this presidential race has slipped out of his fingers. It is out of his grasp. He will fight to try to get it back. He cannot. It appears the writing is on the wall. Joe Biden has the 270 electoral votes he needs. The question now, can the president actually do anything about that if he refuses to concede? Concession is not a legal requirement. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that President Trump needs to deliver a formal speech calling for unity and handing the reins of power over to Joe Biden. That is a tradition. And if there's one thing we know about this president is that he has not been traditional in the past, and he has bucked at it every turn. I will tell you that there is a fair amount of Monday morning quarterbacking going on here. There is finger pointing now, as we have seen for quite a while with this White House, finger pointing over what some critics see as a sloppy strategy. People even close to the White House concerned that this legal push was a long shot from the very beginning, wondering why there wasn't a more sort of forceful face and forceful figure heading that push, given that
as well as a former FDA commissioner, David Kessler, and a current doctor at Yale University, Marcella Nunez-Smith. So those three co-chairs of this 12-member coronavirus task force to be announced on Monday, and that is going to be the beginning of what is going to be a series of very public, I'm told, speeches and announcements, and really trying to reconvey to the American people the seriousness of this crisis. We are going to expect briefings from them, perhaps daily televised briefings, and really try and seize that mantle. Now, Jake, the question here is, of course, the Trump administration is still in office. Dr. Anthony Fauci is still a government employee. So unclear how they can sort of meld this together. But at least up until now, I'm told that the Trump administration behind the scenes, in terms of the branches of government, has been participating with the Biden transition project. So we'll see if that goes forward here. But that certainly underscores the importance of where Joe Biden is placing his priority by making this COVID-19 task force announcement on Monday his first choice. And Jake, one other bit of news. I am told that at this hour, a little more than 2 hours after the president-elect was projected, that he has still not heard from the White House or the president, who, of course, as we know, is out golfing, but certainly has his telephone with him. So at least as of this hour, he has not heard from him. He has, of course, had phone calls with Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, who I'm told held up his phone from a Brooklyn street so Joe Biden could hear all that cheering and elation, at least in Brooklyn. Jake.
All right, Jeff Salony in Wilmington, Delaware. Thank you so much for that report. Anderson?
Jake, thanks very much. There are also getting some tweets from a number of other people. There's a statement from former U.S. President Jimmy Carter saying, Rosalind joins me in congratulating our friends, President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. We're proud of their well-run campaign and look forward to seeing the positive change they bring to our nation. I think that you heard the Mitt Romney statement. Ann and I extend our congratulations to President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. We know both of them as people of goodwill and admirable character. We pray that God may bless them in the days and years ahead.
I love it.
You go.
Look, class acts. Yeah. They're showing how it's supposed to be done. These are the traditions. This is how it's supposed to be. Be very partisan before the election. Make sure you draw those lines and be very clear. Don't be personal, but be very clear about the issues. Get on the right team. Fight for your team. Afterwards, shake hands and come together because, after the election, we got to move stuff forward. I just wanted to say, I'm seeing so many people happy about Kamala. And just a couple of things. One, all these young girls posting all these pictures of her all across the country, all around the world. And then there's some secrets to her success. The Divine Nine, the nine Greek letter African-American organizations, the fraternities and sororities that got behind her, they're all thrilled. Everybody went to a black college. She went to Howard University. All those people are just going nuts. They're pillars in the black community that came together. We got assets in the black community. We got folks, the black church came together behind her. So young women, the Indian American community, thrilled. This is a big, big deal. Celebrations for generations now are just bubbling out.
Yeah, I was moved by Susan Rice talking about her daughter. I remember when I was with President Obama, the impact that his election had on all these young children who all of a sudden felt like they were part of it, like they had that opportunity, that there were no limits. This is another historic event like that.
Hey, I'm trying to think, have you seen sort of crowds like this in the streets? We saw Atlanta, Washington, New York, Chicago, these kind of images. Did that happen in 2008?
You know, there were spontaneous events that erupted. Obviously, we had a huge crowd in Grant Park in Chicago. There was this feeling of elation because of what that election represented. I think there is a combination here of elation and relief. It does say something about our country, you know, that people rejected divisiveness. And I think that's part of it. And there's an affection for Joe Biden because he does represent those things that people like to believe, just in terms of character and his approach to people. They like to believe that's what our country is. That's what our leader should be. But make no mistake about it, Donald Trump, his political project was based on dividing the country relentlessly and furiously, and it had a tremendous effect. We should celebrate the incredible turnout that came out, but he drove it, and he drove his people out, and he drove his opponents out. And what you're seeing here is a sense of relief that pressure valve has been.
You're saying it goes beyond just.
It's not just, you know, for Obama, it was very much about him. For in this case, it's about Joe Biden, but it's also about the end of a period that many people felt was brutally inconsistent with their view of the way it's worked. Just let me say one last thing, Gloria, on all this conjecture about what Trump will do and will he conform. He has not conformed to any of these rules, laws, norms, institutions of our democracy before. I don't anticipate he will now. But the real question is, you know, Jeff Zeleny said there's going to be a task force, a coronavirus task force named Monday by Biden. What level of cooperation are they going to get from the government that is in place now and for the next 2 months? There are all these substantive things and work that needs to be done. And
that is the tradition that there's cooperation.
When we made the transition from Obama to Bush, in every conceivable way, there was coordination between the Bush administration and the incoming Obama administration. And it wasn't because they were ideologically together on everything. It was because that is how it's supposed to work. And this is really, really important. I would love to see President Trump display a regard for these rules and laws and norms that he hasn't for 4 years. I'm not anticipating that, but I'm very concerned about what the absence of this cooperation could mean, particularly in the midst of a public health crisis.
I think what you might have is people like Tony Fauci and Deborah Birx cooperating on their own and deciding to make themselves very available, make all their information very available to the Biden task force, because they obviously have disagreed with what this administration has done. I don't think the Biden task force will be asking Dr. Scott Atlas anytime to go sit in on their meetings. So in that sense, I think there may be cooperation.
They may have a lot of time because if the reports are true, they may be out of work.
They may be out. I want to add one thing about Jimmy Carter sending out this congratulations. I'm kind of waiting for George W. Bush. Because Donald Trump has never been a member in good standing of the President's Club. We all know that. We all know he doesn't like any of them. He's tweeted about them, particularly Bush. And the question is, at some point, at what point I should ask, will George W. Bush come out and congratulate Joe Biden? He did not participate or endorse in this campaign, which was telling in and of itself. But so long as these legal challenges are going on, the question that I have is about a lot of Republicans, but including the former president. When is he going to come out and say, okay, you lost, Joe Biden won, and I need to congratulate him? Because as David is saying, in his own transition, he was so remarkable with the Obama administration. And clearly he understands how important this transition is. And I'm just wondering whether he's going to put his thumb on the scale here and say, you know what, he won.
Well, I don't know of any president who's been more apolitical since he left office than George W.
But it's not a political statement.
Well, the point is, I mean, he didn't go out and campaign for his brother, and his brother was the president. I mean, so let's put that in context here, that to sort of now turn to George W. Bush as someone who's going to sort of set the tone. George W. Bush, when he left, and I've met with him a few times, not many times, but a few times, and he is done. He's done. And so I don't look. I'm just saying, don't look for him to sort of put step into this.
So is he gonna
because
wait?
It's been very clear that he's not. He's letting the country go its own way, and he's not going to be putting the stamp on it one way or the other. That's number one. Number two, these celebrations, which is an opportunity, in my opinion. Not. I'm not saying this to be critical. They're not about Joe Biden. I mean, they're about Donald Trump. It's releasing the pressure, and the oppression is over, and all the things that you guys are saying here. It's not about Joe Biden. So, and again, I'm not saying that to be critical. I'm saying that it's an opportunity.
In what way?
It's an opportunity because, in many respects, Joe Biden comes to this.
Thank you so much for those who tune in to watch Lagos State Media. The breaking news is over now. We are expecting the president-elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harrison in the next few 3 to 4 hours, which is 8 o'clock in local time in United States America, where they are now in the center to address the nation. So we will be back for the live news and the press of the president-elect. Thank you so much for joining me and those who have been watching Lagos State Media Show. We will be back in the next 3 to 4 hours. Have a good night, good day, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are tuning in. Good night.
It's your boy Young Love, Ajib Entertainment. Pancho Lagos State, Panchi America, Banyi Dwal, Pancho Lagos State, Panchi America, Banyi Dwal, Banaban, Wokaji Lake, Kankara, Watana Watchin, Oga Leg, Gear, Wow, Garay Lake, Panda Wadia, Panchi America, Banya Dwalabano, Chingatongo Pandon, Kujura Vaya Cheka, Paku Panda Jiru, Wadia Bi Dwalaventing. State Panchi America, Banyi Dwal, Banaban Pancha Lake State Panchi America, Banyi Dwal, Banaban Wokaji Lake, Kankara Watana Watchin, Oga Leg, Gear, Wow, Garay Lake, Panda Wadia, Panchi America.